and welcome to Politics Today. I'm Farrukh Pitafi. Yesterday we spoke about Pandora Papers or Pandora Box in Pakistan's politics. Once again, we are going to talk about that. As we pointed out yesterday, a new committee has been created by the Prime Minister of Pakistan. But that is not all. Regarding the names, people are still asking, why is it that the entirety of 700 names have not been visible so far? Because last time when Panama Papers came, at that time, and then Paradise Paper also, at that time, whatever was the list, it appeared in one go. This time it is not happening. Whether there is some reason behind it, or this is how actually things are rolling, we are going to talk about that as well. There are concerns that all influentials in the society are somehow connected. I'm talking about the spheres of influence: media, ex-journals, politicians, bureaucrats, and of course various other businessmen. We are looking at the faces at this moment. We are going to talk about all that. And remember, yesterday we were talking about the question: if you are going to investigate, if you are going to take any action, what are the laws that are there? Why is it that after almost 6 years of Panama Papers, we haven't been able to create a solid framework that ensures that all these issues are actually regulated and people know what is going on, or the state at least knows. And that we are going to do, because in the absence of the parliament doing its job, then it is left to either shortcuts, some kind of techniques, use ECP, use another system, or then to the courts to make law. We are going to talk about all these matters. I'm going to introduce the guests in the program as well. But before that, there's a package that our team has prepared for you. Let us watch that.
The Pandora Papers leak revealed the names of almost 700 Pakistani offshore company holders, which included politicians, bureaucrats, military officers, and media moguls. The Pandora Papers were released by the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists after an investigation of almost 2 years, sifting through 12 million leaked files, which included government records, bank records, and tax advisor files. This revelation has taken the world by storm, and it has become the talk of the town in Pakistan as well. Many of the people named in the Pandora Papers have come forward to deny any wrongdoings, and some have even denied ownership of offshore companies. The Prime Minister of Pakistan has expressed extreme displeasure and ordered the formation of an investigation cell which will look into all the accused, and strict action will be taken against all those responsible for any wrongdoings. Federal Minister for Information and Broadcasting Fawad Chaudhry said that the investigation cell formed under the Prime Minister's Inspection Commission would question all individuals that are part of the Pandora leaks, and facts will be placed before the nation. The cell would determine whether public office holders had declared their foreign assets, and if not, a corruption case will be referred to the National Accountability Bureau. For money laundering, the case will be handled by the Federal Investigation Agency. In case of non-public office holders, the tax evasion matter would be forwarded to the Federal Board of Revenue. The Prime Minister himself has received flack by many media outlets for being involved in the Pandora Papers. However, the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists has clarified that Imran Khan has had no link whatsoever with the Pandora Papers.
Just to frame the problem again, remember Panama Papers, at that time the data that surfaced was around 2.6 terabytes, right? And then during Paradise Papers it was 1.4 TB. This time it is 2.94 terabytes. That is significantly bigger. Last time when we are talking about Panama Papers, the total number of cases or properties that were mentioned, or accounts, was 11.5 million. Then Paradise Papers actually came and we found the number 13.4 million. And this time it is 11.9 million. And yet, we have talked about the terabytes also. Now, let me introduce the guests I've got in the program today. Yesterday, we tried to actually talk to politicians, and one felt that one was not getting a clear, discussion on the frameworks that I kept on asking about. Today, therefore, we have two lawyers. Barrister Safir Laghori joins us in the studio. Here, but during the Panama Papers, he was also involved in the litigation. Thank you very much, sir, for being part of the program. Naseem Siddiqui sir is a senior journalist. He also joins us, a dear friend. Thank you very much, Naseem Siddiqui sir, for being part of the program. On Skype, we are joined by Mohammad Zishan Merchant sahab, who is advocate, High Court, tax and corporate law. And he's also a consultant. Thank you very much, sir, for being part of the program. Barrister Safi, with your permission, I first have to actually go to Merchant Sahab. Merchant Sahab, your take on what laws apply to these matters, and whether the word offshore company is present on any statutory books.
Actually, we have to look at from the perspective that income tax ordinance caters for every possible scenario. If a resident Pakistani has any world assets or world income, he has to declare those assets and world income not only in income tax return but also in his wealth statement. And if he has earned any income outside Pakistan, then he has to pay tax not only in the foreign jurisdiction, but if the tax payable is more in Pakistan, he will get the tax period of the tax already paid outside Pakistan. And then
That's a good point. So you have to first disclose it. If you don't disclose it, how does the state of Pakistan learn that Farrukh Pitafi has an offshore account in so and so country?
So Pakistan is signatory to OECD conventions, and those conventions now ensure that the information is exchanged on a regular basis. For instance, if Mr. Pitafi, you have an account outside Pakistan and that is not declared, if that account is in, let's say, in Dubai, then Pakistan and Dubai, they both are the signatory of OECD convention, and Dubai will exchange that information with the Pakistani tax authorities if you are not a Dubai resident.
This agreement that you are talking about, Merchant Sahab, when was it signed?
It's been signed. Actually, it was signed. Dubai signed it last year, and Dubai started sending information since last year. But UK has been sending this information since 2018 onwards. So when this amnesty was in place, this agreement was already signed, and then
so why is it that and allow me, actually I'm going to bring the same question to the studio as well. That is to say, if there are laws regarding this and agreements, why do I have to listen to ICIJ to know who is actually stashing wealth or accounts abroad?
So that's a very good question, and as Merchant Sahab just mentioned, so we are signatories to the OECD convention, but that does not cover a lot of offshore havens that organizations like ICIJ are now exposing, and that's where the majority of the money is. That's where the real problem is. That you might have treaties of information exchange with the UK, with the US.
Cover the Swiss banks?
I'm not aware if it covers the Swiss banks, but I am aware that Switzerland has been increasingly becoming more transparent. I am not sure if Pakistan has a bilateral or a multilateral treaty at the moment with Switzerland. But that said, the problem really lies with these little offshore island countries, British Virgin Islands, Mauritius, Macau. This is where the majority of the world's money is being routed to. And I think also, correctly pointed out that there is a massive tax problem, and the income tax ordinance does cater to it. But we have 2-3 other laws as well that also cater to this entire problem. And one of the most important laws that I feel we need to bring up is the law that was introduced last year, but has become mandatory on everyone who owns any sort of business in Pakistan, and that is the SECP anti-money laundering wing, wherein they have introduced the concept of universal beneficial ownership. So if any person owns any assets abroad, they must declare to the SECP, and that declaration goes directly to the anti-money laundering wing. That anti-money laundering wing will then determine.
The name frightens me, but the fact is that I don't give any declaration. I hide facts. then what happens?
That's precisely why this is not absolutely correct.
OECD doesn't declare it, or whatever the reason.
So you're absolutely correct. So this is what the problem is. This is precisely why we are in the state of the world where there is a flight of money from the poorer countries into the richer countries, as the Prime Minister Imran Khan keeps saying. Trillions of dollars are flowing because obviously there is not sufficient exchange of information.
Right.
That's obviously what the problem is, and that is precisely why leaks such as these are so important and need to be taken into account without thinking about them as being malicious or being...
Whether they are malicious or not, my concern is it is Government of Pakistan's job. Why is somebody else actually doing it, right?
So the government...
As per the law, how do you define which one is a cognizable offence in this case?
Right. So, okay. So let's look at a variety of offences then, and then we can decide which ones are cognizable and which ones are not.
Can you actually compile a list till the time I actually bring in my third guest, who is very patiently waiting for it?
Sure.
Siddiqui Saab, this time, I was noticing media was covering these reports, but many names were actually of media owners. So who's going to bell the cat? They are very powerful people. Who's going to actually hold them accountable? Because tomorrow, media channels are going to actually tell us that it is a reputation of free media.
Thank you very much, Farrukh. I was going to start with this thing as well, and you asked the same question.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, because
I thought that I shocked you.
No,
For a second,
I was
thought that you were surprised
I
and
was
asking
expecting
you.
the same question, because when we are showing too many faces of politicians, and their names were in Panama as well before, and now in the Pandora as well. And if the names of the media personals are here, it should be given in the media as well. That should the positive reporting, and that is the other side of the picture as well. If it's all legitimate, nobody should be frightened of all these things. And I've noticed from the last 2 days that there was a big hype for Pandora leaks, but it's not like Panama leaks. Because in Panama there was
Slightly better than Paradise though, because in Paradise we hardly saw any names. But this time, hardly. Perhaps it is because last time there was a Prime Minister who was involved, and this time there isn't. And we are lucky that this time Prime Minister's name hasn't even been mentioned.
And Farrukh, most of the names, those were in Panama as well. Like, what is the authenticity of these names bringing out? Like, if we see that Punjab ex-minister Aleem Khan name is there, and his offshore company has been mentioned again in Pandora. But he has mentioned that company 15 years ago in the election commission as well, and in his assets as well. So there is nothing wrong with him, but his name has been highlighted many times. So there are,
hang on. As journalist, it is not my job or your job to actually declare who is innocent and who is not. We can publish their clarification, right? But it is ultimately the job of the tax authorities, state of Pakistan, and the courts to decide who is innocent and who is not. I understand that you are actually just relaying what he was saying, right? I don't know whether everybody is looking at his offshore assets at this moment, because he has acquired significant onshore assets.
He just bought TV channel.
So perhaps people might be discussing that as well. Let me go back to Zishan Merchant Saab. Zishan Saab, what offences are we talking about here, and under what law?
Sorry, could you say that again?
You'll have to talk louder, sir.
You have to say that again. I missed your sentence. Question.
We are talking about offshore companies. We are talking about the revelations that came out. And the question in my mind is, if we are building up so much hype, there must be some crime. What are those crimes?
Actually, when we speak of the word offshore company, the immediate thought comes in our mind as Pakistanis is that something is fishy, something is wrong, something is hidden. You see, we need to look at the fact that the law provides that if I earn any amount of income which is in excess of $10,000, or if I own assets in excess of $100,000, I have to declare that in my wealth statement and income tax return. So the question arises when, if I haven't declared those assets or income, and the evidence suggests that I am the owner of that. I mean, there is anti-money laundering cell in FBR also, which does all this checks and it does check the assets and all the information that is coming into Pakistan, and the fact that companies, SECB has this section 452 wherein if there is any company outside Pakistan and if I am the shareholder or if I am the ultimate beneficial owner, I have to declare that with SECB here in Pakistan as well. And if I do not do that...
Hang on. So what you are saying is not declaring is the actual offense, nothing else?
Absolutely, because then your return is a misdeclaration return. Because when you sign or when you submit your return, you give this verification that everything that you own is declared in this statement. And you certify that statement, and when you file your return, it's a valid declaration that everything is declared therein. And if something is not, then it means that either it is an ill-gotten money which you are trying to hide, or there can be any solution to that, any other proposition to that.
Right. Machin Saab, I'll come back to you, sir. I'm told that Federal Minister for Information is with us. Fawad Chaudhry Saab has joined us on telephone. Fawad Chaudhry Saab, thank you very much for your time. Now the question at this moment is, the government has created a high power committee. What will be its TORs and how soon will it actually bring about the results?
Well, if you look at what Pandora Papers is all about, 700 Pakistani individuals have been mentioned as having offshore companies. And as you know, having an offshore company, maybe prima facie, doesn't constitute any offense unless it's not declared in Pakistan or it has been used for money laundering. So the cell we have constituted will now look at the FDR record, the wealth tax returns of all these individuals who have been named in the Pandora Papers to ascertain that whether they have declared their companies with FDR or not. If they have not declared these companies, this entails obviously the consequences. The consequences now are of the two types. There can be the taxation proceedings or the tax evasion cases, and if the companies are used for money laundering, then obviously there can be cases for money laundering. And FIA and FPR and NAB will be associated with these investigations.
Right. So what's your reason? Since we are talking about 700 people, and so far what has actually been telegraphed to the media is hardly that kind of number. Does the government of Pakistan have access to all these 700 names?
Ask ICIJ that your own website claims that there are 700 Pakistanis named in the Pandora Papers, so we would like to have access to their record so we can tally that names with our FDR record.
Right. Do we have any, because you are also an accomplished lawyer, do we have mechanism to seek that information, because this organization actually is not based in Pakistan?
No, but this is a public charity organization that actually works under a charity, and all the information they collect is for public purpose. So the selective, kind of exposures won't help. So they have to provide all the names.
Right. And regarding the high, actually influential office bearers within various parties and then media and others as well, does the government actually plan to take any actions before the inquiry is over? Perhaps in the past we have seen that there were names that were mentioned, they voluntarily stepped aside. Is there a possibility of that sort, sir?
See that there are three, the minister's name. The Shaukat Kareem Saab, for example, he had an offshore company, but his explanation is very solid. What he said is that he created a company to negotiate with the state bank a deal of Silk Bank, the bank he owned. So now if a company is created solely to negotiate a deal with the state bank, how will that be an illegal company? Likewise, if a company of Khusro Bakhtiar's brother and Khusro Bakhtiar is named, but his company is declared in SPR. So these are the kind of stuff that is now coming up. So let's see, let's wait for the conclusion of the inquiry.
Right. Farrukh Sir, Federal Minister for Information, thank you very much, sir, for being part of the program. As we take a quick break, when we come back, we are going to further this discussion. Take a break. Welcome back. Before going to the break, we were talking about Pandora Papers. A friend of mine actually called it Pandora Papers because he thought that there is more speculation and noise rather than substance. But regardless, we were talking about which offences might be there. And I'm going to, earlier I stopped Zishan Macham sir, but I'm actually, let me continue, then I'm going to read back to him as well. Barrister Safi, when I actually went ahead, I left you with the question of offences which might be committed and under what law.
Yeah, all right. So
declaration is one thing. What else?
So first, let's look at. First, I think it's necessary that we differentiate the kind of people who can be accused of any offences.
Okay.
And there are two types. So there's the general businessmen and the media moguls and everybody else who's being talked about, who should not be in the same category as politically exposed persons. People who have a political interest.
I'll
tell you why. I'll tell you why. I'm getting.
No, sorry to cut you. You are saying that media owners don't have any political power?
No,
or any businessman who randomly...
It might be very powerful.
No, hang on.
I'm just telling you about the Pakistani law,
allow me,
and I'll tell you why.
Allow me to just slip in one more anecdote. That a random property tycoon who might be so powerful that he lends or gives his vehicles, his plots and his planes to people, because that person is not powerful.
That person is extremely powerful, but Article 63, 64 Constitution don't apply to them. So, now the problem here is that politically exposed people have a separate set of laws, and that's what I'm trying to get to. That because they have...
I'm saying that politically exposed persons have the wrong definition.
even so, that's for the parliament to decide what politically exposed people are.
Okay,
But
this time parliament will decide, not the court.
Let's just for a second then. Let's focus on what the differentiations are that the law has created before we jump into whether these are practical definitions to begin with or not. So, looking at the legal definitions of what we have, so first of all, the people who would be hit hardest by this are what you would call politically exposed people, thanks to Article 63, 64, in which they have to
62, 63.
62, 63,
Yeah.
yes, and in which they have to file their returns before the Election Commission in Pakistan, declaring all of their assets.
Right.
And this is the reason why Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif was disqualified. So all of these people are now facing possibilities of disqualification if they have not declared their assets before the Election Commission and before relevant authorities.
Okay.
That's one thing. Now moving forward on to the people who are businessmen, rich tycoons, media moguls and what have you. These people have a separate set of laws that apply to them. A, FBR laws that have already been discussed in detail. B, SECP laws that have also been discussed. C, there is yet another bunch of laws that apply, which is how was the money sent. The Foreign Exchange Manual of the State Bank of Pakistan governs the transfer of money from Pakistan abroad, and that has to be declared once again with the State Bank.
Right.
Any penalty there would once again land you in problems. Then we have the problem of the FIA.
Any violation that actually doesn't trigger an alarm will incur penalty. It only to the abuser or the facilitator, like a bank as well.
So so when it comes to money laundering, they are obviously not happening through banks. Money laundering happens
Obviously.
Yeah.
How do you know that?
Because banks have to report everything to the state bank. Banks have a very with the coming of FATF, banks have.
Have you gone through the FinCEN reports?
There have been problems.
Not only our country, in India.
Globally, yes. So there are irregularities, but generally the law, and especially FATF, ever since Pakistan has been on the grey list, the requirements as far as the banks are concerned are
Okay, I'm going to take the word bank back.
Yes.
And I'm going to call them facilitators.
Yes, facilitators have punishments met out to them, because anyone who facilitates, even law firms, by the way, the lawyers are usually more suspect than other people.
What are the punishments for them?
I don't know the punishments off the top of my head, but these are all criminal law firms.
I'm going to ask Mr. later, but earlier I asked him this question: is the word offshore company mentioned in any of our laws?
If not to my knowledge, no. I don't believe that the word offshore has been specifically mentioned. But the word foreign companies have come about.
Havens.
Tax havens these are colloquial words. These are not words that have any legal meaning.
What might be the technical words?
Just any foreign entity, any foreign company. So
you
the law does not concern itself with tax havens and which the jurisdiction is.
Any foreign entity becomes very agnostic term. It has no value of its own.
It does, because any foreign company, foreign company is a word that's very often used with the SECP Companies Act and also with the FBR.
Yeah, but there is a clear substantive difference that you acknowledge. Why is it that our law is not
our law as yet, because if it were to, this would trigger an international debate as to what qualifies as a tax haven and what does not.
Right.
So Pakistan would be forced to categorize certain countries, which would bring the flack from those countries onto our diplomatic circles.
Siddiqui Saab, there is a reason I keep on asking about the 700 names not yet being revealed, right? We have this, media walas especially have this fixation with a few prominent names, right? It happened during Panama Papers. First it was about few politicians, then it became about few families, then one family, then one man, and then of course it also somehow went away that the gentleman in question is sitting in UK, right? NRO also, if you remember, at that time everybody kept on talking about People's Party or the government of the time of the government which was coming. Nobody thought that MKM and tons of bureaucrats actually got the benefit. Is there a possibility that our media, while it very kindly builds up the hype, can actually focus on the entirety of the problem, not a few select cases?
Exactly, you are absolutely right. But we have seen that what happened with Panama, as you said that nothing happened, nothing came out of Panama. So nothing is going to came out. Something came out,
was sent to jail, and then he walked out.
Then he walked out, and now the Pandora leaks. So I don't think so. Something will come out from this as well. Only it's media hype and just to blame game to each other in the political field. I just want to know from you as well, from him as well, that what is the legality of these tax havens? Are these legal? Yes, as far as I know, in London, most of the places there are tax havens and people put their money in investments over there. If somebody from Pakistan, they have shifted their money to UK, France or anywhere legally, and then they have made companies over there, and they are working there and they are paying tax in those countries. So what's the point if the names are going out?
It's a beautiful question, and one we have been discussing in the past as well. But let me admire your deflection capacity. Yet I ask you what media can do to ensure that all these 700 people are identified, and that media doesn't pick or choose, but it actually builds a case against the whole operation.
Why I see they haven't given the names of the other people yet, because they
Have you asked? Has anybody asked?
We never asked them to give the names of the politicians.
Person who has incredible credibility and who has contributed to this has been all over the media channels, right? Has anybody asked where are the other names?
Yeah, people are asking. I have seen many programs today, they were asking for the names as well. Umar was part of that. He was not heading that one. So
I'm not
so my question, ICIJ, my question to ICIJ is that why they have just given the names of the politicians?
You are not giving answer. What can the media do to ensure that all these people stay in focus?
No, media is still saying that if somebody has got ill-gotten money and they've made companies overseas or in the tax havens, they must be brought into the notice of the FBR or to the election commission if they are the members of the assembly.
But media's responsibility primarily is to its viewers, is it not? So when you are telling, you might go to FBR and tell them whatever you want. You are not actually, if you are selective in telling people what is going on, then there is a problem.
They are not selective. Whatever the names has been given, they have just shown those ones. If the other names come out
Panama Papers, 400 names, right? Do you remember who was the third or fourth name?
No, I don't.
Why? Because we were consuming the same media. We are part of it, but we are consuming. But media actually deflects, doesn't focus on the
because the people are not ready or they are not interested to listen the name of me or yours name. They also take interest.
It is based on the skill of the media. Actually, we work in the profession which is of storytelling. If we don't know how to tell the story,
if we show that Mr. Anwar Ali or somebody else's name is there, so the public is not interested, then we take the names of the politicians and
Muhammad Ali or whatever the name is influential and he affects your lives. Will that
you can see that most of the people, those were in corruption cases,
so
the people
will ask everybody a question. You will not ask your own profession why we are doing what we are doing.
I just have an observation.
Very quickly, I have to
the observation that I have, and something that's been perplexing me, is when it was announced that the Pandora box would be released, before the names came out, why is it that the government of Pakistan, through some notables, went on TV and said the Prime Minister's name is not on it, and why the Finance Minister decided to hold a press conference before his name even came out? And so this is what makes me curious as to how these people knew that their names would be in it or not be in it.
No, actually, this was a long exercise. These people were questioned first, and then this declaration was made, right? And the first they were given an opportunity to explain that.
How did they know the Prime Minister's name is not on it? Because he wasn't questioned?
IJ actually mentioned this, right?
After releasing the names.
Yeah, of course. But Majid Saab, earlier you were talking about the offences. Let me ask you about three basic questions. One, earlier I asked our friend here whether the word offshore company, tax havens, or something of that sort actually appears in our law? If not, how do you tell foreign assets which are good and foreign assets which might be in murky territory, right? The second thing is now, if you find out that there are these accounts and there is money illegally stashed outside, you can punish the person, but how do you bring the money back? So go ahead.
I have two questions. Did you ask two questions only? Because
I have.
Okay. The income tax ordinance has section 107, which says that, which is for agreement for avoidance of double taxation and prevention of fiscal evasion.
Yeah.
You see, and under this section, there is this clause which says that the information will be exchanged, and that clause is clause E, where it says that exchange of information for prevention of fiscal evasion or avoidance of taxes or income chargeable under this ordinance and under the corresponding laws enforced in that other country. So this is the condition which is present under the income tax ordinance, and as I was saying earlier, that there are multilateral agreements that have been signed by all these countries to exchange the information, that if I am a resident in Pakistan and if I have a bank account outside Pakistan where I am a non-resident for that jurisdiction will provide this information to Pakistan. And then the officers of the FBI over here will firstly check that bank account or that.
Let me agitate your point. I understand that you are talking about international agreements and you are talking about essentially which becomes international law. Just tell me if it is basically based on good faith, operations. But tomorrow, if an organization chooses not to cooperate, despite having this agreement, and then withholds an information, what is the recourse we have?
Take an example of Dubai, that it has categorically stated that they will not provide the information of immovable property. They will only provide the information of movable assets. And they have categorically stated that they will not provide the details of any immovable assets or the properties that have been held by these Pakistanis in Dubai.
My point is, whatever the information they are liable to give you, if they decide not to give you that information, they tell you about it, what is the legal recourse you have as a signatory?
You can claim that you can write to the government, and it is the agreements between the governments only. And you go through a proper channel, you ask the government, and if they do not cooperate, you cannot do anything about it. So far my knowledge is what I have.
Right. Do you have any case or any example where this might have produced some good results?
Yeah, so when the Supreme Court in 2018 raised these Dubai property cases, the FBR sent notices to everyone. First the FIA sent the notice, but since FIA was out of jurisdiction, then FBR sent these notices. And a lot more cases were made out of that information, based on that information, which was somewhat correct but not accurate. But then after that, the ministry came and people declared that those assets, and a lot of revenue was collected. So yes, that information which is being exchanged to certain exchange bring the results, the desired results. However, as the digitization is going on and the world is these days, I would say, squeezing, and the information is readily available, it's going to become very hard in the future to have an offshore company but not declaring it. In the past,
OECD agreement, does it cover offshore companies? Offshore tax havens?
The term offshore I have to check, but yes, the purpose of OECD is to exchange all the information of the non-residents with the resident companies.
What does our law call an offshore company, sir? How does it actually address them?
It's a foreign company. The word offshore is
Just a foreign company.
It's our ordinance.
Yeah, so it doesn't matter whether it is in the United States or Cayman Island.
Yes.
Won't you say that that is pretty ambiguous a term?
You see, I am just looking at section 123 of the ordinance. It does mention where an offshore asset of any person. I'm sorry, I was wrong earlier, but it does mention an offshore asset of any person not declared earlier is discovered by the commissioner or any department or any agency of federal government. The commissioner can assess that property or asset to tax if the person does not provide an adequate
Right. Merchant sir, very quickly, do we need further work on tightening the system?
You see, under FATF and under anti-money laundering...
I'm not talking about FATF. My concern is as a citizen, I don't have to worry about that.
The AML, the things are being squeezed, and now that DFBPs, designated non-business financial professionals, are also obliged to give the information to FBR if they see any wrong thing happening with these...
Right, it's a long answer, sir. I don't have the luxury of that kind of time. Very quickly, yes or no, we need further work?
We need further work, but more than that, we don't need further work. I think the global community needs further agreements to facilitate the flow of money back to
a lawyer to give a yes or no answer. They will never give you that. Yeah. Right, sir. I'm told, Merchant Saab, that we have to conclude the program. Barrister Safiullah Ghori, thank you very much, sir, for being part of the program. Naseem Siddiqui Saab, thank you very much for being part of the program. Viewers, it is a developing story. So, as long as the developments continue, we will be discussing these matters. But so far, there is hardly any place for any of us to make a judgment call. It is essentially the job of courts and the authorities that actually have the oversight capacity. There are two meanings of oversight. One, to keep on looking at things. The other one, when you actually ignore the facts. So let us hope it is the first oversight that continues, not the second one. This was today's program. Thank you very much for watching. Take care.